Oh, really?
Trying a new one. Yep. So we're seeing, is it set up okay? You can, how's that? Okay, good. So we're in chapter 16 of 2 Samuel. And let's look at verse 1. So when David was a little past the top of the mountain, he's coming over the mount area of the Mount of Olives. There was Ziba, the servant of Mephibosheth, who met him with a couple of saddled donkeys, and on them 200 loaves of bread, 100 clusters of raisins, and 100 summer fruits, and a skin of wine. All right, do you remember Ziba and Mephibosheth? So Ziba is the one who a couple of chapters ago actually told David, when David said, is there anyone left in Saul's kingdom that I can do something good to? Ziba said, hey, Jonathan's son, Mephibosheth, is there. And so he brought him to David, and then David puts Ziba in charge of all of Mephibosheth's land and everything. He's going to work it with his, how many did he have, 19? No, 19, 15 or 19 sons, I can't remember now. And 19, was it? And he had 19 sons and a bunch of servants of his own. And so Ziba was rewarded for bringing Mephibosheth to him. So there should have been some loyalty there, right? So here he comes with these donkeys and all of this provision. The king says to Ziba in verse 2, what do you mean to do with these? And Ziba said, oh, these donkeys are for the king's household to ride on, and the bread and the fruit are for the young men to eat, or the young men to eat, and the wine for those who are faint in the wilderness. So here he's got this beautiful little supply of goods that he's going to give to David to use as they're all fleeing and leaving, right? So that's all good. But, verse 3, the king said, where is your master's son? Now Ziba was a servant of Saul originally. He's talking about Mephibosheth, who's actually a grandson, but it would have been very common for this term to have been used, your master's son. He's talking about Mephibosheth. Where is Mephibosheth? Why is he not here? So Ziba says to the king, oh, indeed, he is staying in Jerusalem. For he said, today the house of Israel will restore the kingdom of my father to me. So, what is he saying? He's saying Mephibosheth stayed in Jerusalem with Absalom, where Absalom is going to be, and didn't come with you, because the hope is you and Absalom are going to kill each other, and the kingdom's going to go to Mephibosheth. Perfect plan, right? Except for, how does that make David, who gave Mephibosheth everything, who said, you will sit at my table forever in this covenant promise, how does that make David feel towards Mephibosheth? And he has no reason at this point to believe that Ziba is lying about anything. There's no reason to believe that Ziba would lie about anything. And so David takes him at his word and says in verse 4, so the king said to Ziba, here, all that belonged to Mephibosheth is yours. Ziba said, oh, I humbly bow before you that I may find favor in your sight, O Lord, my Lord, O King. So, David believes him and says, okay, then everything that I gave to Mephibosheth, it's now yours, Ziba. Thank you for the donkeys and the raisins and all the good things that you brought to us. I'll deal with this later. Right now, everything is yours. And Ziba is quite pleased with all of that, isn't he?
I have a question.
Yes.
So is
Mephibosheth.
Now, was he the son of Jonathan?
Yes, he was. He was the little lame boy.
He was a lame boy.
Yes.
Okay.
He's the little lame boy. And so Ziba is his servant to do all of the work for
and
him.
he also was awarded that he said at the table, I mean, he ate at the
Jonathan
table
did,
with-
yes.
he
I mean,
took him in like
Mephibosheth
family.
did, yes.
Yes, I took him in like family. And we ate at the same
Exactly,
table.
exactly. So you could see why David would be terribly hurt that Mephibosheth is supposedly sitting in Jerusalem waiting for Absalom and David to kill each other so that he can take over the throne that once belonged to Saul. It would be a shocking thing, but at this point everything is shocking David because Absalom is coming after him to kill him, and it's going to get worse from there. Now, in verse 5, when King David came to Bahurim, there was a man from the family of the house of Saul. Okay, we're back to Saul's family again, whose name was Shemaiah, the son of Gera, coming from there. He came out cursing continuously as he came. And he threw stones at David and at all the servants of King David. And all of the people and all of the mighty men were on his right hand and on his left. Okay, that's pretty stupid or pretty brave. I don't know, but you come out with a king, not only cursing him verbally, but throwing rocks at him. He's quite agitated. And he says, and Shemaiah said thus when he cursed, come out, come out. The other translation that I liked was get out, get out. But it's the same sort of thing. You bloodthirsty man, you rogue. The Lord has brought upon you all the blood of the house of Saul, in whose place you have reigned. Now, what would he be talking about? Well, he could be talking about the death of Saul, the death of Jonathan. Just here recently, the death of, we're going to study about it in a few chapters. There's going to be 7 members of Saul's family that are going to be slaughtered, and David's going to give them up. There's all kinds of things that this young man that's in the family of Saul, for whatever reasons it is, he believes that it is David's fault that Saul's family has been completely wiped out. And so he's blaming him for that death. And it says, and the Lord has delivered the kingdom into the hand of Absalom, your son. He's happy about that. And the reason why the Lord has delivered him is so now you are caught in your own evil because you are a bloodthirsty man. So he's quite angry at what's going on.
Can I? Okay,
Yes.
At some point, David, like, it sounds like lost the favor of God, or isn't seeking the counsel of God like he used to, or
In this particular event?
just somewhere along the line here, doesn't have discernment.
So you're saying like by fleeing and doing that
Yeah.
sort of thing, you're not seeing him really
Yeah,
following.
he used to go, okay, let's see what God says about this.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, and not to mention the Lord.
Yeah. Yeah. There is definitely a lapse, isn't there? So verse 9, then Abishai, who remember is one of David's nephews, the son of Zeruiah, that's David's sister, said to the king, why should this dead dog curse my lord the king? Please, let me go over and take off his head. Well, I mean, you would think that's kind of a normal response for a bodyguard at that time, right? To say he just doesn't understand why David is even allowing that. David has an interesting response here. In verse 10, he says, but the king said, what have I to do with you, you sons of Zeruiah? He's talking to Abishai, not to Shemaiah, but to Abishai. And he says, so let him curse, because the Lord has said to him, curse David. Who then shall say, why have you done so? So basically, here we see David again, not standing up and saying, hey, don't even bother me, Abishai, about going over and cutting off his head. Maybe the Lord has said, curse David, and that's what he's doing. Maybe that's what I deserve. Maybe that's what God has sent him to do. Why should you stop him? And David said to Abishai and all of his servants, see how my son, who came from my own body, seeks my life? How much more now may this Benjamite, from the tribe of Benjamin, that was Saul's tribe, so that would make sense. So he's sounding a little pitiful here, isn't he? He's saying, hey, my own son wants to kill me. Why not this man? Shouldn't this man be allowed to do it? Let him alone and let him curse, for so the Lord has ordered him. So he's interjecting in here, perhaps this is divine discipline, comes from the Lord. Ready, this is what I deserve. My own son is after me. It's kind of has that attitude of poor, poor, pitiful me, right? Which we're going to see David is going to wallow in that for a while. Which, Sherry, you're very right on with what you're saying. He's not receiving his advice from the Lord in this. He's taking it all on
But
himself.
he's saying the Lord, every time he says, so the Lord has ordered him.
Well,
Yeah.
it's because
He's saying it,
yeah,
but he's not
yeah,
doing it.
yeah, absolutely. And in 12 he says, it may be that the Lord will look on my affliction, and that the Lord will repay me with good for his cursing this day. So he's saying maybe God will come back and recompense me for all that's going on and all that he's cursing me with, since I deserve it. It's kind of like Eeyore, since I just finished watching Winnie the Pooh. It's kind of like Eeyore. Yeah, not much of a king.
Yeah.
Poor me. And just let him alone. And as David and his men went along the road, Shemaiah went along the hillside opposite and cursed him as he went, and threw stones at him and kicked up the dust. Boy, that showed him, didn't it? It reminds me of the umpires on the baseball thing, when the players kick the dirt up. It's like, how dare you do that? So it always makes me laugh.
Maybe that's where they did that.
That could be. It's showing great anger. Now the king and all the people who were with him became weary, so they refreshed themselves there. Now, meanwhile, all right. So that's telling us here's another story, separate. Meanwhile, Absalom and all the people, the men of Israel, came to Jerusalem, and Ahithophel was with him. Now, David's fleeing, heading to the wilderness of Judah. Absalom is in Jerusalem, and it says all of Israel was with him. Who are they talking about when they say all of Israel? So those 10 tribes that had gone against David initially, it appears those are, because Israel is primarily the 10 tribes. Yeah. And then Judah is generally those 2 tribes that are left down there, which is Benjamin and Judah. And so those are the 2 tribes down below. So generally speaking, when they talk about Israel, in this sense, they're talking about those 10 tribes that followed him. And so they are there with Absalom in Jerusalem, and Ahithophel was there with him. And so it was when Hushai the Archite, David's friend, came to Absalom, then Hushai said to Absalom, "Long live the king! Long live the king!" All right, so a couple chapters ago we met Hushai. Hushai is the older guy that came to David when he's fleeing Jerusalem, and David says, "Hey, if you go with me, you'll just be a burden."
Oh, yeah.
Remember?
Uh-huh.
And so he's an older person. You need to go back to Jerusalem. And here, if you go back to Jerusalem, you could really be a help to me. Because if you go back to Jerusalem, you could spy on what it is that Absalom is doing. And so Hushai agrees. And he goes back to Jerusalem. Now here he comes, coming into Jerusalem, and he's going, "Long live the king." Who's he talking to? Absalom. So he's playing the part perfectly, right? Excuse me. So he's playing that part perfectly, and Absalom says to Hushai, "Is this your loyalty to your friend? Why did you not go with your friend?" Now who's he talking about? David. So he's asking him, "Why are you not with the king? You're supposed to be his good buddy. Why are you here with me?" I'm surprised he doesn't just slaughter him right there. Just kill him. But I guess because he's an older man or whatever, for some reason, Absalom decides to just ask him, "Well, how come you didn't go with David?" And Hushai said to Absalom, "No, but whom the Lord and this people and all the men of Israel choose, his I will be, and with him I will remain." So in other words, Absalom, you're the man. You're the guy everybody wants. I like you best now. I want to be with you. Furthermore, whom shall I serve? Should I not serve in the presence of his son? So as I have served in your father's presence, so will I be in your presence. Well, my red flags would be up right now, going ding, 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 ding. This doesn't ring true, but it flew with Absalom. And in fact, so much that he's going to use him as one of his advisors. Then Absalom says to Ahithophel, "Give advice as to what we should do." So this is what Ahithophel is good for. He's an advisor to David, possibly the grandfather of Bathsheba. He's been David's trusted advisor all of this time. And now Absalom has him. And Absalom says, hey, what do you think we ought to do now that we're in Jerusalem and David is fleeing? How should we do this? Well, Ahithophel says to Absalom, go in to your father's concubines, whom he has left to keep the house, and all of Israel will hear that you are abhorred by your father. So we've talked about this claiming of the concubines. So these 10 concubines that David leaves there, probably thinking they were very safe because who would bother the king's harem? He leaves them there. Now, Ahithophel is telling Absalom, you go in and have sexual relations with them, because once you take them, you are claiming the throne.
And wasn't that prophesied earlier that would happen?
It is exactly. If you go back to chapter 12, it says, in chapter 12, it says, the sword will never depart from you. Thus says the Lord, behold, I will raise up adversity against you from your own house, and I will take your wives before your eyes and give them to your neighbor, and he shall lie with your wives in the sight of the sun. For you did it secretly, but I will do this thing before all of Israel.
Well, that's why it's in there. I
And
wondered,
so-
why is that it's so important that they put
That is exactly right. And so it was one of the prophetic things that Nathan had told him. He told him the sword is not going to depart. You're going to always have violence in your family. And he warned him that your wives, your concubines, that were considered wives at that time, would be taken. And that's exactly what Ahithophel is telling Absalom that he needs
But
to do.
I thought they weren't even supposed to take the concubines, even if they were the king was dead.
If they just go into the position of the next place, but by claiming the concubines, you are claiming the throne, and it's a you cannot return sort of thing, and that's why he says all of Israel will see that your father abhors you, because once Absalom does that, there's no going back. Point of no return, and all of Israel will know we can back Absalom because there is no chance that he and David are going to reconcile. Because if you look at it from their perspective, there had to be some hesitancy there about backing Absalom, because what if David comes back and they reconcile? What if you were the one who stood with Absalom and now David comes back and takes the throne back because he and Absalom make up? You're in a world of hurt now because you've backed the wrong horse. So in order to make sure that there's no hesitancy there, Ahithophel is telling Absalom, you do something so much so that the people will know there's no going back now. We're going to stand with Absalom. He cannot reconcile with his father. And so that's what they did. They pitched a tent for Absalom at the top of the house, and Absalom went in to his father's concubines in the sight of all of Israel. Now the advice of Ahithophel, which he gave in those days, was as if one had inquired of the oracles of God. And so was all the advice of Ahithophel, both with David and with Absalom. So that little thing is in there to tell you Ahithophel gave great advice. That's going to be important because in the next chapter, we're going to see how that plays out. So Ahithophel was known for good advice. David counted on him. Now Absalom is counting on him, and he's the one who told him to do this very thing, right? Look how things are just piling up as we're moving into the story, as things are getting worse and worse. All right. Now, to finish up, I gave you, look here on 1 Kings chapter 2 in your book. We're going to read this because we're going to find out what happened to Shemaiah. We don't hear any more about him. We will hear a little bit more about him, but we need to know what it is that David is going to do with him. So, I don't know that I'm going to read this actually right now. What I'm going to do is leave this for you to read this week, but we are going to see that although David is going to let this pass with Shemaiah at this time. When he gets ready to die and Solomon is stepping in, he remembers this man who threw rocks at him. And he says, you need to kill him. He needs to die. And Solomon will take care of the problem. But the interesting part of this is how many years go by between the time when David gets rocks thrown at him and he says, maybe I deserved it, I'm such a terrible king, to the point where he tells Solomon, you need to kill him. He shouldn't live. So David lives with that. And Solomon will execute Shemaiah. So that's a little addition to your story there to finish that up. All right. And then I included Psalms chapter 7 in your packet because, as I promised you, that is one of the chapters that was written with this event. If you look at the top, it says, a meditation of David, which he sang to the Lord concerning the words of Cush, a Benjamite. And they believe that Cush and Shemaiah, based on some verses in Chronicles, is the same person. And so he is writing this particular Psalms about someone who did that. And he talks about let my enemy pursue me and overtake me. Let him trample my life to the earth. Lay my honor in the dust. Save me from those who persecute me. Deliver me lest they tear me like a lion. And you can read this particular psalm and see that David is in the mindset of what he's just experienced with this man, Shemaiah, and when he writes this particular psalm.
And we talked about there had been a lapse in David searching God's will.
Yes.
And then this must be after
Yes.
he comes back around
And David is known for that, right? Always
Yeah.
coming back and seeking God
Yeah.
again when he falters. And so some of his beautiful psalms are written with that very thing. So take some time this week, read what happens to Shemaiah in Kings, and also look at Psalm 7, and you can probably understand it better when you see it through that lens. All right. So, any questions on chapter 16? Kind of interesting, huh? All right, we can turn that off until we get ready for 17.